Hi, this is Investing and Mortgages Part 2. We want to try to build a spreadsheet. And so we're going to go ahead and work with our formulas in our sheets that we had before and then actually build our spreadsheet. Okay, so we want to mimic this spreadsheet, for instance, for a savings account. And so we're going to deposit $8,000 and we're going to have 6% interest paid monthly and figure out what our balance will be at a certain amount of time. So setting up your spreadsheet. If you go here, I can make this a little bit bigger by highlighting everything and then maybe making it a little bit bigger. And then since this is all highlighted, if I make one change, then all of them change. And I'm not going to use months, and I'm going to go down here a little bit. I'm going to just, I am going to use months, but I'm going to call them 1, 2, 3. Highlight all these, and then grab the handlebar and fill down, and then I can get, for instance, 20 months. And so this would be our month for our heading, and I'll put the rest of the headings in, and you pause and come back. Okay, here's the headings. Some of these are a little bit too big, so I'm going to move this over, and you can just double click on, get that highlighted like that, and double click, and it will fit perfectly for you. It will automatically set that up. So we're going to make a deposit here. This would be our same value. So this is going to be equal to this 8,000. I don't want to write 8,000. I want to avoid numbers as much as possible, and I want to include cell names or formulas more so, because that just makes the spreadsheet way more powerful. Okay, so then that's equal to D5. So I enter with this here, or else I can enter on my keyboard. Then I want this one, what's going to happen after 1 month, I'm going to have $8,000 in there again. I don't want to write $8,000, so I'm going to make it equal to this amount here. And then my interest earned is going to be equal to, now here's my formula. It's going to be equal to my balance times my interest rate, working interest rate. Well, here's my problem, is that if I put in 0.005, that doesn't make it works, but it doesn't make my spreadsheet very powerful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put headers up here and enter values for these and then use them into the spreadsheet. So I have these, that would be the annual interest rate. Now here I need the monthly interest rate. The monthly interest rate is just going to be this interest rate divided by 12. So my deposit here, I can put in the $8,000. And I want to put this here now. Instead of typing in the 8,000 here, it's nice to have a heading with our input values. So this value here would just be equal to this cell, D1. And my interest rate, I can just put that in. I'm going to start off with 6, and so I put in 0.06. And then the monthly interest rate is just going to be the interest rate here, and I'm going to divide by 12. There we go. Now we can format some of this stuff as well. So if I click on here, I can make this $1. If I click on here, I can make this interest. This one, I don't know if you want to change or not. I'm going to leave it as 0.005. The computer will automatically calculate this as 0.06 though. Now if I go back here, instead of using 0.005, what am I going to use? Well, I want to use these inputs here. Deposit made, I didn't make any deposit. And then my new balance. My new balance is going to be equal to whatever I deposited, or the starting balance of the month. And then I'm going to add in the interest earned. So I should have 8040. Now this shows the power of compounding. With this, now I take this balance, and I don't even want to do this. I'm just going to fill down. And when I fill down, it says E6. And so my cells increment. And I can show you that here. When I fill down, grabbing this and grabbing this handlebar, I'm going to fill down, and it's just going to increment the numbers as I go down. Now I can do this here too, but then there's a problem. And the problem is that this becomes D4. I want the monthly interest rate to stay at D3. So what we do is we do something called the $sign, and the $sign freezes whatever comes after it. So when I do a fill down, this 3 will not increment, but this B6 will increment. So if I grab this and fill down, there it is. And so that's going to work for us. So going back to this, Now I earn a little bit of additional interest over what I did the first year. That's the compounding. And then this one would still be the same. I'm just going to add in the 2. And now if you notice, I can actually take all this, highlight it, and then I can fill it down over time. So if I want to find out what happens after a year or even longer, I can just fill down. Now I don't like all these formats, and so I'm going to highlight all this as dollars. I guess I can highlight all this for dollars. Okay? So then there's our spreadsheet. So we can answer some questions about how much money we would have after 1 year. And look at now with the compounding, I'm making extra $2 every month just based on interest that I've earned, and not just off the extra $8,000 or the original $8,000 that I put in. Now here's the power of this, is that now I can take this enter column or this enter row here, and I can put in 10,000. This just means that the space is not enough, so I double click there and there's the stuff. And then I can change the interest rate too. Right now at a bank you can probably get 0.1%. Oh, they called it 10%. I didn't like that. If I put in 6, let's see what it does. Oh, that's a fault of the computer. Okay. So presently most banks are charging or giving you 0.1%. That's tiny. I had to change the decimals on this, so I went up here and changed the decimal places. And so then it worked when I put in 0.1. And the interest rate, look at what it's paying you on $10,000 a month. Not very much. Okay, and it doesn't even increment very well just because it's such a small amount. If you do an online bank account, maybe you can get 0.9% presently. Look at that, that doesn't work very well. So I'm going to have to put in 0.009, and then there's 0.9%. Now that's a little bit more healthy, and then it does increment, and you do get interest upon interest, which is the compounding factor. Now we want to move on to the mortgage spreadsheet. So we'll start a new tab. So if you go down here to the tabs, I can call this savings, and I call it plus because we put in the additional header up here where the input values, and then we just change these input values and everything else changes. I want to create another sheet though, which is the mortgage plus. And so I'm going to set this one up very similar, so why don't you put in the headings and get that all sorted out from our original sheet. And here's our original sheet that you can set this up with. And so put the headings in and get it all sorted. Now for the spreadsheet here for the mortgage, this one is the mortgage. What has to happen is that you have to put the headers, and these are the inputs that you're going to be putting in. The payment, however, is the calculation that you made for the monthly payment based on the principal and the interest rate and the term. So we'll go ahead and do that in here in a little bit. But if I just put in 8,000 just to make sure that this thing works, and let's use 0.06 since we had trouble with that other interest rate. The term, and let me pause for a second, I got to put in working interest. No, I'll show you how to enter this. And so I forgot the working interest rate, so I'm going to highlight this, and then I can go up here to insert, and then it inserts a row. So I need the working interest rate, which is the monthly. The monthly interest rate will just be equal to this cell divided by 12. And then the term, you got to figure out what your term is. Right now our term is 1. And we'll crank this up to 2 years, 3 years, whatever it might be, or 20 years, 30 years. Now your payment is going to be your calculation. And from your original sheets, we can figure out what that's going to be. So here is the payment formula for how much you're going to pay every month for your mortgage. Okay, so this is what we need to input. So I'm going to put that in now. So we got PW. So that's going to be equal to my principal, and you got to put a times in, times my interest rate. It will be your working interest rate, and then I need to put another times, and then it's going to be 1 plus your working interest rate, and then you're going to be raising that I always forget what this is, so I always got to look. So I'm going to raise it to the n times t, which would be 12. N is always 12 for us in these cases. So we're going to raise it to, and I got to put this in parentheses, this exponent, 12 times my years, because that's how many times I'm going to be applying this formula. So here I'm not going to put 1, I'm going to put the formula there. Okay, that's all in the numerator. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, let me put parentheses around my whole numerator. I don't have to, but I think it's a good policy. And I'm going to go divided by, and I got to put this all in parentheses in the denominator. So this denominator will be 1 plus w to the nt minus 1. I need to group that though. So it's going to be another one, 1 plus, so I have two parentheses there, 1 plus the working interest rate raised to the, once again, parentheses nt. So it's going to be 12 times the term in years. And then I need a minus 1. And then I need to close parentheses. Denominator needs to be all in parentheses. Let's see if I get my 688 here. If I didn't, I made an error. Okay, good. And I'm going to make that dollars. I'm going to make this one dollars. I'm going to leave the interest off that right now. Now down here in my spreadsheet, here are these two terms. You set your pattern with 2 or more. Grab the handlebar, and I can go down for a long ways. 360 is where I want to go, so here's down here. Now I'm not going to be able to see this unless if I put this on a split screen, so I go over here until those two arrows change, and I'm going to do a split screen so that if I do a 30-year loan, I can see that the balance goes to 0 and my spreadsheet's working. Okay, so let's see, balance owed. I'm going to get that from up here. And then the payment made. The payment made will be here. So it's going to be equal to this cell. Interest paid. Now here's the interesting part, is that if I owe $8,000, the bank wants the interest off that $8,000 or whatever my balance owed is. So I'm going to have this equal to my balance owed times my working interest rate. And here's my working interest rate here. So of my $688, I'm paying $40 just to have that loan. I'm paying it to the bank, really. So if this is my payment, this is the portion of my payment that's interest. How do I find my principal? Well, that's going to be just this, and I'm taking away the $40, which would be there. And then my new balance would be, well, I'm going to take this balance owed. I can't take off the interest, but I can take off the principal paid. So that's going to be equal to my 8,000 minus my principal paid. Oop, I keep on shifting there. So my principal paid. Okay, if we need to review that, here's all the formulas. They're spread out a little bit, but that gives you an idea of what we have. Okay. All right, now what do I do? Well, this balance is going to go shifted over here. So this is going to be equal to this cell, and then I can do the payment made. The payment made will always be the same. So since I filled down here, what do I need to do with this original value? Well, I need to put in the dollar sign so that when I do fill down, it doesn't change. Okay, so it's always going to be the same. Interest paid, this formula would be the same too. Remember, which ones do not change? Well, usually stuff that we steal from up here is the stuff that we don't want to change. The B8 we do want to increment. So when I fill this down, let's see how this shows up. See that the 3 doesn't increment. That's where the interest rate is, and then the B8 and B9 do. So going back to the money mode, there we go. By the way, I'm doing control, and then there's a squiggle button next to the left of the number 1, and that switches us back and forth. Okay, then our principal paid, I can just fill that down, and then I can just fill this down. Now the beautiful part about all this is I can grab this and then fill it all down. There you go. and after 1 year it should be 0.